Well, hello everyone. Today I'm with Adila Laïdi-Hanieh. She has kindly invited our invitation to have a conversation about Fahrelnissa Zeid in line with Dirimart's exhibition, a three-character play, which has been extended to May 31st due to coronavirus that we have to be all locked down. Adila is Director General of Palestinian Museum, and she's a very savvy researcher and a writer of an extensive book on Fahrelnissa Zeid, painter of inner worlds, which was published by Art Books in London in 2017. And in line with our previous exhibition, Ode to Passion by Fahrelnissa Zeid, we also published the Turkish translation of this book, which was slightly extended, I believe. So here is the book that I'm proudly presenting. Adila, welcome.
Thank you. Merhaba. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. Well, Adila, you prepared this extensive book on Fahrelnissa that brings together a quite big selection of her work, but it was, you also exposed her art or explained her art through her personal life. You provided insights to the reader and to other researchers. But I believe your interest in Fahrelnissa's work stems not just for academic reasons, but also from your personal relationship with her. Could you please tell us how you met Fahrelnissa and maybe your first memory with her? And how did you decide working on this book eventually?
Yes, thank you. So the first I met her, my mother met her. And my mother met her and she told me about that she met a princess and who paints and who speaks French and who lived all over the world. Couldn't believe my eyes, and I told my mother, I have to meet her, please, please. So eventually I met her. I don't remember the meeting her, but the most important thing that happened is that my mother asked Fahrelnissa if she could take me on to take classes with her, art classes, and to my utter wonder and surprise, she accepted. However, I couldn't go in the morning with the other students because I was at school, so I would go in the afternoon. So basically, it was wonderful being in her house every Wednesday afternoon for about 2 years or 3 years, and except during the school holidays. And it was amazing, her house was like this cave with all the paintings everywhere, and it was like come true, because then you would have the surroundings, all the paintings and the objet d'art, and then she would talk to you. So it was really a marvelous experience. I don't want to use like supernatural terms because Fahrelnissa doesn't need more supernatural adjectives. But then in 2015, I was very lucky to be invited by the Istanbul Biennale to speak about Fahrelnissa Zeid. And then I delved back into the world of Fahrelnissa. And then I looked differently at her, at the way people were writing about her in these old books from the 80s and old catalogs that I had at home. And it did not fit first. So I noticed that it did not fit with two things. It did not fit with the Fahrelnissa that I knew, that I remembered, and also it did not fit with the way people wrote about art in 2010. So I thought somebody should write a book about her, and that's it. I will stop here.
So when you said you were taking private lessons from her, so you were not part of the institution that she established in Amman. I mean, you were not be able to catch up the classes with the other students. Is that right?
Well, the institution is a very informal term. The Royal Institute for the Fahrelnissa Zeid Royal Institute for Fine Arts was officially incorporated in 1976 and registered in Amman to show that, this was a serious endeavor. But she was the only teacher, and she met with her students periodically and so on, and she was very, very structured and I can talk later about how she taught, but she dealt with every person depending on their capacity, and but also had the same way. So it's like, take a sketchbook and fill it with work and show it to me next week. And then after a while, it's take this painting and do a charcoal, fill it with a charcoal composition. And then she would critique. So there was no classes to catch up because every instruction was separate. However, there was the group instruction, which I missed, which she did, that the students would take the instruction from her. They would go home, they would paint, and then they would come back the week later and they would bring their work and they would have the group critique, the group session. And that, of course, I did not do because I was at school. So that, yes, I missed. But I can say that it's okay because I did not become a painter in the end, and also because in a way I was having the separate instruction, from her.
So I was going to ask, how was she as a teacher, but you explained a little bit, but I don't know if you have other things to say. And then also, how old were you when you met her and started taking classes? I think you were younger than her other students, because in the photographs, we see her surrounded by a group of her students, which, depending on the information that I know from you, then how you met her, you were not matching them age-wise.
No. I was, I think, around 14, and they were adults. No, look, she was a very supportive teacher, but she was also very, very severe. Very, very severe. I'm not going to say here the things that she said, but, very severe with her, let's say, with her students and with me, but also very supportive. And I guess because she had that experience that she talks about, and the readers will know about it, with Roger Bissière, that he took her painting, the painting of the model, which was all pink, and he threw it on the floor, and then she heard him tell the secretary in the academy, this is a society lady, and then he told her, you're not doing anything. So and this is how it is in the Beaux-Arts, they're supposed to destroy you. So she was very severe, but at the same time very supportive. She wanted people to grow. So it was not something of complaisance, It was, you would get the full package, the supportive and the critique.
Did she have any male students? Because we always see women around her, mostly.
Well, when she first arrived in Amman, she said that she would have an open house and she would receive anybody who would want to meet her. So some, let's say, established artists, even though Amman at that time, when Fahrelnissa came to Amman, as I write in my book, it did not have an art scene. So there were a few artists, less than a handful, who had studied. And I explain more the circumstances in my book of the Amman art scene. So I'm not saying there was nobody. It's really explained in my book. But anyway, when she arrived, there was just a handful of people, and they were men. And she did receive them, but I don't think it was with the idea of teaching them. I think it was to receive them and to exchange them and to exchange with them and to connect. But then, this is what I was told in the interviews, it did not work out. And so she decided, that's it, I'm going to open this school and I'm going to teach. And she would handpick, this is very important to know, she would handpick the students from people who did not have largely an experience in painting, but who had, and this is important, a life experience. And she would pick them based on personality, based on knowing them, etc., as I write in the book. But I think the fact that she didn't have, I think the fact that she would receive these students at home it meant that you needed to have a certain comfort level, and maybe it was better to receive women than men, established artists. Plus, you know, I'm sure there was this machismo factor for some people, that what would they learn from this elderly lady, you know, and the princess, and it's, you know.
So actually, I want to dig a little bit more about her surrounding in Amman, because after her years in Berlin, London, and Paris, moving to Amman was, of course, a big change in her life, especially in her lifestyle. And she has also lost her husband. For instance, while she was part of social gatherings in Europe, in Berlin and London, it was mostly for her husband's diplomatic position, but also in Paris, and I think a little bit in London too. It was because of art circus. But on the other hand, we know that she was very big on self-isolation, like many of the artists do. Fahrelnissa was not an exception. Especially painters work more isolated in their studios. But then from what's been documented about her Amman years is that she's mainly with her family or her students and friends in crowds. So she I feel like she didn't prefer to be alone in Amman, or getting herself alone in her studio. Is that true?
Yes, well, it depends. Amman, you know, was a long period. So she came, she was about 74, and then she passed away. You know, she was about 90. So we're talking about a very long period. And the problem with Amman is that she, you know, you did not have the opportunity of going out and walking in the street. So she would, because Amman was a very small town at that time, very small. So for everything you need a car. Somebody has to drive you, and then where are you going to go? It was a very small town. It's not like today. And it was, you know, American style. So it was very much car dependent. Whereas she had lived, as you said, in Paris, which she loved, where you can go out, you know. So she had to bring the life, she had to bring the city to her house, okay? Mm-hmm. So this is why she would receive a lot of people, because she could not go out, or so what she did is that she would receive people in the morning, and there would be specific days for the group receptions, for the teaching, or to receive specific people one-on-one, whether it was students or friends or something. And then the afternoons would be the time where she would not receive people anymore. I would go in the afternoon, but I would not see her all the time. Sometimes I would see her at the beginning, and then I would work by myself, or I would see her at the end. If I was lucky, I would see her the whole time. But the afternoon was her rest period, where she would not see anybody, where she would read, sleep, talk on the phone, but mostly it was her quiet time. And but Fahrelnissa, you know, and this is very important to understand about her, and this, I mentioned this in my book, that she has, or this is what I discovered rather in my research, that she had these cycles of moods. And so she had periods where she was very gregarious, and she would need a lot of people around her and a lot of noise. You know, she would have musical bands come to the house, and she would give sometimes these lavish receptions. Actually, I went to some of them when I was young. Lavish receptions with, you know, society and so on. And it would be very crowded, and she would be at the center. But then there were these periods where she was just be by herself and not wanting to receive anybody. So it was just a question of her needs and what she needed. And it would vary according to the day, according to the time period.
I see. And do you think this change of lifestyle also affected her art? And also in Amman years, we see that she has switched mainly to portraits, and maybe only to portraits. And these portraits are different from the portraits that she had made in her earlier periods. In her early, they are significantly different from her earlier portraits. What do you think might have caused this switch? And could you please elaborate on her later style?
Actually, what she did at the beginning of the Amman period is that because she was very much in the teaching mode, she brought a friend of hers that she had known from London, a lady who was from Sri Lanka, but who was based in England. And she brought her to Amman to teach stained glass to her students, stained glass making. And all the students did that. But it was very difficult to find the raw material, the type of glass in Amman. And then there was a problem because that work needed soldering, with fire, and you needed to buy special supplies and lead, which was very heavy. And so she brought her, and the students did not continue with that art style because it was too hard. However, Fahrelnissa did produce some works with glass, with stained glass, that are in some private collections. So it was not only portraiture. However, yes, you are right. The bulk was the portraiture, because let's not forget, she was better and sicker. Now, I write at length in my book, in chapter 8.
Adila, sorry, your voice broke. She. What did you say? She was weaker, did you say?
Older and sicker.
Older and sicker.
More sick and weaker.
Okay.
So even if she did the work with the glass, and she had her exhibition in 81, and then she had another exhibition in 83, she was getting weaker. So in the exhibition in 83, which was like a retrospective, she had some gouache work and semi-figurative and so on. But yes, you are right. The main output was the portraits. Now, in chapter 8 of my book, I talk about her practice of portraiture and the different styles, and also the spiritualist approach, and the different styles of portraits that she did, how she painted, how people sat for her. I describe this at length. I also mentioned how painting portraits was a continuation of abstraction, and I explain this in detail in the book. But the portraits that she did in Amman, we have, I think, two kinds of portraits. We have the erratic portraits, where I think she was, this is a woman who grew up in westernized Turkey, and then she lived in Europe. So I think for her, it was like reverse Orientalism. She's back in an Arab country with all these princesses who are part of her family, and she sees them all the time. And Amman was a desert town. I think she was like in this Orientalist cliche. And so she painted some of her students in this regional costume, large paintings of Queen Alia, Queen Noor, Princess Alia, Soha Shuman, these large portraits that are, very much like, I don't know, erratic with an H, presence, representing the culture of the place, like I wrote in one of my texts. But then she had the quick, smaller portraits of her family, of her neighbor, of her dentist, of her grandchildren. And she did a lot of them. And some of them, when I was doing my research, we discovered them in the photo albums. We didn't know about them. And this is important to understand what these were, because Fahrelnissa was, becoming more bedridden, staying in bed, meeting these people. And and interacting with all these people that she loved. She wanted to give a token of love, a token of friendship. So she made these portraits, these very quick portraits. You compare these personal portraits with the other big portraits and the earlier portraits, you see there's difference of style and of workmanship. I think these were tokens of love, tokens of friendship, so that these people would have something from Fahrelnissa, because, Fahrelnissa was very generous. If she liked something, she would give you a bracelet, that she had, a piece of jewelry. She would give you a piece of scarf. So I think this is what it was. It was tokens of love. I'm talking for the small portraits, the family portraits and the friend portraits.
Yes, and then the more elaborate ones that you mentioned, we see that she works in details about the clothes, and she gets obsessed with their patterns.
Absolutely, and I write this because we see this already in her abstract works. That she had this, there's this double gesture of Fahrelnissa. You have the wide gesture because she was a tall woman who had lived large. She had the big paintings, she had the big feelings and the big emotions. She had the interest in the cosmos and the moon and the planets and the movement of the planets. But at the same time, she had the unique power of intensity of focusing for hours on all the geometric, kaleidoscopic motifs that she did in her abstract paintings. So that was reproduced in the patterns, like you said, in the dresses and the costumes. And I write in my book that some of these patterns, if you cut them, they belong in her abstract paintings.
And in the exhibition now at Dirimart'ta, which can also be visited online, organizer.
Yes, it's beautiful. You did a marvelous job, by the way.
Thank you, thank you. We have examples of these different styles.
Yes, exactly.
Together with her earlier portrait works. So we're very pleased to be presenting a variety of her artistic approaches, let's say, or like how her life changed over the years. You can also tell her from her work, and I think the portrait works is a good also example to see the shifts in her life and also in her mood. Okay, my final question is that what do you think you get from her as being her a student? Like,
oh God,
artistically, it could be anything. Like,
okay, let me. I don't know what I got. This is the first question, but let me before I answer, let me finish about the portraits. I write in my book this line, and this is very common of all painters, that when they paint the portrait of somebody, they're also painting themselves. So every portrait is a self-portrait. So in Fahrelnissa, the portraits actually it's threefold, to continue with the three theme. It is a portrait of the person, but also the portraits, the Fahrelnissa portraits, they all look like each other. They are very recognizable. You can recognize a Fahrelnissa portrait. But then there's also something of her. It is like a self-portrait, with the eyes. Like suddenly, Emir Zeid has the arched eyebrow. He never had an arched eyebrow. And the portrait of Aliyah, she has the arched eyebrow, and so on. So this is very interesting that you can, in a portrait of Fahrelnissa that you get, that you buy or that you see her also reflected in a way, except of course for the little portraits she did of the family members. This was, I think, more like completely selfless. Anyway, for your question, I think it's encouragement and validation of working hard and of being an artist. But let me tell you something, not from my point of view as a child then, but my point of view when I wrote the book and I did the research, I was amazed at the wide culture that she had. So, now we live in an age of specialization. She read a lot. She read literature and she read essays. She read books about spirituality, about the cosmos. She listened to music a lot. She was a fan of classical music and of popular music. She read a lot and she wrote a lot, and she read also philosophy and art history and literature. So she was very, very well read. She was not living in a cocoon of her own life. And as I say in my books, she wanted to write 2 novels actually, and she wrote poetry. So this is the fascinating thing to me about her, that she was very well read. She had this broad omnivorous approach to culture, which I respect enormously, that she had this curiosity. And it's really a validation that, you know, you should be open to life. You should be open to cinema, to painting, to theater. She even drew costumes for the ballet that she wanted to do. So she had this omnivorous appetite, which I found fascinating, and which is also, you know, a reflection of her, of the way she was with life, that she to devour life. So she was open to all the arts. So I'm not answering your question.
No, you did. You told me about the inspirations you got from her, actually, which was what my questions was about. And I'm also glad that you referred to this, that the way she was doing the portraits, that she has the model, like the person, but also she reflects herself and like what she sees in that person. Because that is the reason we titled our exhibition a 3-character play.
Yes. Wonderful title.
Exactly, for this very reason. So I'm also glad that you talked about this. Adila, thank you very much. It was a very nice conversation. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.